Tas kamu mana? Kameranya agak itu nggak sih, Am? Kamu udah pergi dulu, Am, sampai ini benar-benar bekerja dengan baik baru bentar aku liatin ini. Aku liatin ini. Terus ini
Wabarakatuh. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this special event from our School of Graduate Studies. We are very happy today. We have a special guest from somewhere, Netherlands, Mahmood, Kooria. He is an emerging scholar. So many publications already published by him in very academic journal, and recently he has published a book in Cambridge University Press entitled Islamic Law in Circulation, Shafi'i Texts Across the Indian Ocean in the Mediterranean. So his contribution to the intellectual history maybe and in general for the Islamic studies is really important. So for this morning, he will deliver a speech on Muslim woman on the move. So in bahasa maybe perempuan yang suka jalan-jalan kali ya. Ada Mbak Maria suka jalan-jalan. Mahmood Kooria recently as a visiting professor at the UIN Syarif Hidayatullah. So we can have him here as as an additional opportunity because there is a linkage from Leiden alumni here. And previously, he is a visiting professor at the Ashoka University in India. So enjoy your time, and this discussion will be chaired by Professor Sunarwoto. So enjoy your time, and also welcome to Mahmood Kooria to our School of Graduate Studies, and thank you very much for having you today. Thank you. Please Sunarwoto to chair the session. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam. Terima kasih. Thank you very much, Professor Najib. We are all professors. Okay. Good morning, everybody. We have already Professor Kooria, but he's not from Korea, from India. If some of you even read Fathul Mu'in, siapa yang pernah belajar Fathul? So the author of Fathul Mu'in come from his dissertation is also about the circulation of, I think, Fathul Mu'in Minhajul Talibin across the Indian Ocean. Okay. Pakai bahasa Indonesia atau bahasa Inggris? So he also speaks Indonesian. Last week, I think, he gave lecture in Lirboyo Pesantren in bahasa. Ya, dia juga bisa berbahasa Indonesia. Menurut CV-nya, dia bisa berbahasa semua secara total sekitar 10 kan? 10 languages. Wah ya. Termasuk bahasa Indonesia. Jadi kalian bisa berapa ya? Banyumas, masukin Tegal. Oke. Ini bahasanya siapa nih? Bukan bahasa aja kan? Okay. So he speaks some 10 languages. Today, as Professor Najib mentioned, he will give a lecture on Muslim women on wanita bergerak nanti, and visual efforts of the Premodern Indian Ocean. So this is very important topic because this is closely related to the position of women in the history of Islam in Indian Ocean. And I think also, I don't know, in Aceh. No. Okay. Not today. Okay. So please welcome Professor Kooria. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. First and foremost, thank you very much, Professor Sunarwoto, and also Professor Nichi, for the generous introduction, and also for having me today in this session. I was thinking of the first time we met, me and Sunar, I think it was in Tunisia, yeah? Yeah, in 2013, 9 years ago, when in 2012. Oh, yes, wow. 10 years. Yeah. And Dr. Sunar or Professor Sunar still looks exactly the same.
Which one?
Only he has got, much younger than he used to be. Yeah. So, as Professor Najib mentioned, my research is primarily my PhD that I defended at Leiden University in 2016 was on the circulation of Islamic texts, particularly Shafi'i texts, Kitab Kuning, Sejarah Kitab Kuning, which were already circulated between Indonesia, India, Malaysia, Singapore, East Africa, like Tanzania, Kenya, Somalia, all these places. Yeah. The one commonality between all these places is that they all follow Madhab Shafi'i, yeah, Shafi'i Madhab, like in Indonesia. Yeah. The question is why? Why are we Shafi'is? Yeah. So this is something that I did for my PhD, and I published this book a few months ago on the Shafi'i text, basically looking at the one text that is Minhaj al-Talibin by Imam Nawawi, Yahya bin Sharaf Nawawi from 13th century, Common Era. So by looking at that text, and then it's one commentary called Tuhfatul Muhtaj by Ibn Hajar al-Haytami, from originally from Egypt, but then migrated to Makkah in 16th century. And then I look at a couple of more texts. One is the Fathul Ma'in by Zainuddin al-Malebari, and then finally I look at Nihayat al-Zain by Umar Nawawi al-Jawi al-Madani. Yeah. So it is basically my book that is published is a story from one Nawawi to another Nawawi. That is Yahya bin Sharaf Nawawi from Egypt, from Damascus, to Nawawi al-Bandani, from Java, originally from Bandan. Is Bandan part of Java or not? Yeah, I get confused. I mean, people in Bandan might not agree, but I mean, people in other parts of Java might say it is part of Java. Yeah. So, Nawawi al-Jawi, who also migrated from Bandan to Makkah in the 19th century. So it's a story about 13th century to 19th century, and then basically looking at one text and addressing this question: why people in Indonesia, people in Malaysia are Shafi, not Hanbali or Hanafi or Maliki or others. So that is already more or less done with it. So even though I'm still passionate about the topic, so that is one reason why I've been visiting some of the consultants like Boy or also visiting some Kiai or Abuya, so many people who also still continue to teach some of these texts in the Pandajian, in the Pasangrams, or inside, outside the Pasangrams. So in order to do what I would say an ethnography of Kitab Kuning. Yeah. So I already did the history, but then I'm continuing. But today what I'm talking to you is completely different. It has nothing to do with Kitab Kuning. It is more about the Sajara Parambuan, or history of women, especially who had traveled across the world, before 19th century. So the Premodern in the title is about the time before, roughly 18th century. So we know a lot of travelers, right? A lot of world famous travelers like Marco Polo, or Ibn Battuta, even the most famous. Or who else that you know? A traveler? Chen Ho, could be one. Now who else? Magellan, Vasco da Gama, Columbus, a lot of people, What is interesting is that all these people are men, Do we know any woman traveler before 18th century? Any? Like, name one. If you name one, maybe I'll give you a chocolate after. So this is the thing. It doesn't mean that women did not travel. A lot of women did travel across, Asia, across Africa, across Europe. But very little studies are there on women who had traveled. And it is very difficult to reconstruct their story. So I'll talk to you about this today. Basically, looking at so in one of the courses that I taught in India at Ashoka University was particularly on this women travelers, not just the Muslim women. It is across the cultures in Asia, Europe, America, Caribbeans, Australia, wherever you name it. I was trying to locate. It was a course for PhD students, Masters of BSc, and we were trying to read sources closely, like primary sources, and in order to understand how women travel. Because there is very little written about them, not just about the Muslim woman, but any woman. So this is an overview how I came to this, because I'm currently working on my one project on matrilineal and Islam. This is something that I have been working after I finished my PhD in 2016. So for the last 6 years, I have been working on this on and off on matrilineal. Matrilineal, right? The Minangkabau community being the best example, but not the only example. So, in which the inheritance is like from mother to daughter, or your nisba, or they say suku to mother, not to father, unlike many patrilineal society, unlike the majority, and it is often identified as contradictory, to Sharia, because especially in Fara'il or Ilmul Fara'il, in Viratha inheritance, they are like they contradict with the Quran, But then within the community, they often justify it. They say that, to put it simply, they are matrilineal, not despite of Islam, but because of Islam. So they say that basically, if you are, if you have to be like a true Muslim, or many communities, not just in Minangkabau, in other places, matrilineal is very much rooted in Islam, and it is not against Islam. Something like the average goes Adat Basanti Shara, Shara Basanti Kitabula. Yeah. So this is a project about that, like basically why inheritance and lineage, why a woman is, how it can be told in a larger context, not only in the Minangkabau context, but across, yeah, in the Indian Ocean, like a larger framework. That is something that I always love to do, instead of like focusing only onto one place. Broadening the canvas and taking things in a global historical perspective. So that is the background for the project, and then I'll like overview of what I'll discuss, and then I'll come to the women travelers in general, and then the gendered journeys, and then general trends of travel among Muslim women, and then I'll focus into maybe 3 cases. Yeah, one case about a 8th century account, and then an 11th century account, and then a 15th century account. And then I will come to some of the shrines dedicated to women, like Makkah, Perempuan, and then related narratives and then conclusions. So about the matrilineal Islam, this is the website that I have been trying to prepare. Although I started some time ago, it is still an ongoing project. The website should look much better than what it appears on the screen. But it is still a work in progress. Basically, I try to bring in all sort of different materials related to it, from articles, dissertations, books, and legal cases, court cases, images, and many other things that are related to the matrilineal communities. Yeah. And the major communities that I focus, of course, is the Minangkabau, possibly the largest matrilineal Muslim community. And then also in Malaysia, there is the Minangkabau community, right, in Negeri, Sembilan. But in India, also there are Muslims who are matrilineal, like on the Coromandel coast, Malabar coast, and a group of islands called Lakshadweep Islands. All of them are matrilineal and Muslim and Shafi'i for that matter. All of that, all of them. And then in Sri Lanka also, in southeastern districts, the 3 districts. And in the Africa Timor or East Africa, we have there's 2 provinces. Sorry, in Mozambique there is the Cabo Delgado and then Nampula provinces. Where also they are Muslims and matrilineal. Yeah. And then the Comoros, another group of islands, a country with 3 or 4. Basically 4 islands, but one is a French territory. It was a French colony and it continues to be a French colony, but the other 3 are independent countries. All of them are also matrilineal. And then they are not the only one. There are many more, like in Cambodia, the Bajuni in the Swahili coast, so not just in the in one country, but like many countries, Tanzania, Kenya, Somalia, all these places. Yeah. And then in South Aceh, Anak Jame, which is also an extension of the Minangkabau community. So there are many more. I try to put them in a map. It's a bit amateurish, but still you can see the blue dots, which are some of the major matrilineal communities. And what is important for the matrilineal and Indian Ocean is the question of travel or the mobility. One reason why, so mobility is at the center of the matrilineal traditions. Mobility, or the necessity to travel, or it is systematically ingrained in the system that people must travel, like Marantau, in the Minangkabau. Once the men come of the age, or like Bale, once they are mature, you have to get out of your home, in search of better prospects, maybe in terms of education or economy, business, or trade, or whatever. Basically, you have to go away from your house, and then so that is like you have to travel. Yeah. So that is like already part of the system, in the Minangkabau Ada. Yeah. And similarly, on the Malabar coast, there is something called visiting husbands. The husbands who are visiting to the house of woman, and the question is, where do they come from? Or basically the act of visit. Yeah. So they have to travel in order to get to their partners or spouses, or mainly women, wives' houses. Yeah. And then in the Mozambican and Comorian context, there is one scholar, Ian Walker, who says that mobility on the East African coast is an integrated aspect of life, especially anchored in the custom. So it's also in the Ada of the Swahili, of the Comorian. It is also very much part of the ingrained in the system that you have to travel. But what is interesting is that it is all about men. Yeah. So men who have to travel, not necessarily women. Yeah. Do women have to travel? So yeah, men who are mobile, there are different categories of their travel. Yeah, mobility. What I identify in three categories. So long distance, and then inter-regional mobilities, and then regional mobilities. The difference is that long distance is like basically across the subcontinent, or across the the Arabs going to, let's say, Southeast Asia, or the Malays from here going to East Africa. This sort of like a very long distance travel. Yeah. And then also inter-regional, within the region. So like maybe within the Malay archipelago, maybe people travel from, let's say, the Makassar to, or Sulawesi to Aceh, but within the Malay region. Yeah. So men often travel like this, but also within the region, like let's say within Aceh or within Sumatra, people travel. Right. You are going on Melatau, but maybe from Padang you are going to, let's say, Pariaman, or from Pariaman maximum you might go to Banda Aceh. Not necessarily you would go to Jakarta or Yogyakarta. Yeah? So this sort of regional mobility, and we see that historically across the communities. Yeah, this part of men who are traveling. Yeah, the patterns and the regions. And the question is, were women immobile? It appears a bit mangled. I think when I switched from this computer to this computer, like some of the letters appear a little bit. Yeah, it is okay. Like an E, standing alone. So we don't see much, women who are traveling, whether short distance or long distance, in history. Yeah? I'm talking about historically. Like once we come to the 19th century, 20th century, after the steamship and the aeroplane, and now something like maybe bus and train, all this more or less came in the 19th century. Yeah. Before 19th century, before this sort of technology facilitated women's travel, it was almost very rare that women travel. But then the question is, does this mean women were immobile? In the existing literature, in history, especially on the Indian Ocean area, it appears as if Indian Ocean is a patriarchal space. Yeah, it is a story or a history of only men. Yeah, men who are traveling as ulama or traders or sailors or even pirates. Yeah, very rarely we see any history of women who also travel maybe as ulama or traders or all these sort of different purposes. Yeah. So it appears like in the existing history, the existing historiography. Yeah. Indian Ocean as a patriarchal space. And also, we rarely see women traveling before the 19th century. I believe you follow that, why 19th century is important. Yeah, by the 19th century, we see all the new technologies that facilitated. Yeah, and also, like for example, from Europe to Asia, a lot of colonizers came. Yeah, like Belanda or English or Portuguese or Spaniard, all these sort of different people came. Yeah, but it is mostly men who also came. Before 1867, 1869, when the Suez Canal, that connects Mediterranean and the Red Sea, very few people, very few women, European women, white women came to Asia. So before that, what do we know? We still see that, if we dig into sources and dig into books of history written before 19th century, we see women who travel as traders, preachers like ulama or Dai, or admirals like Lakshmana. Yeah, you might immediately think of Lakshmana Malayati. Yeah, or also pilgrims who go for different, and these are not just Muslim pilgrims. Yeah, like who are going on Hajj, but also like to Spain, to the Catholic shrines, and many other places we see women who also traveling, but also forced labor, especially domestic slavery, and we see that particularly in the case of Ethiopian women, who were forced to travel. Ethiopian East African Habshi, Abyssinian women, who were forced to do slavery, especially domestic slavery. So we see that kind of accounts across the places. Women who did travel across the ocean, and I sort of categorize them as two. Two categories. One is the occupational mobility, and then the forced mobility. So they vary from some of these. Yeah, that can vary for business, for armies, squads. Like for example, Ibn Battuta talks about, when he writes about Maldives, he writes about a group of women's army who travel from island to island to protect their places. Yeah. And then the naval expeditions and brokerage and enslavement, another major important mission, and then also many other religious and diplomatic missions. Women also participated. I'll come to maybe some of the examples of this. So some of the common trend, not only for Muslim women but across the is that global travel before the age of steamliner, and airlines. So aeroplane, of course, we know it has facilitated. Like for example, from Jakarta to London, you can travel within 14-15 hours. Which required at least 1 month if you were traveling 1 century ago. And it required about 6 months if you were traveling 2 centuries ago. So from 6 months, it has decreased into 15 hours. So because of that, and then also the danger, before the aeroplane, there were the steam lanes. Steam line, the ships that travel with the steam engine. Basically a machine. Before this came, it was mainly dependent. All the ships were dependent on the winds. Sailing ships, and depending on the mercy of the winds. You never know where you start, where you go, where you end up. Although you have different mechanisms to ensure your directions and your route. So therefore, it was very rare, not only for women to travel, but also even for men to travel. But even then, when men did, we rarely see any narratives about the women. And in addition to that, there were many prohibitions and prescriptions. Like for example, in Islam, there is this concept here for women to travel without a mahram is haram, right? So similar to that, it's not only in the Islamic cultures, many other cultures. I will quote some of them. So for example, here is a decree from Japan in 17th century that a wife who drinks tea excessively, and a woman who has a penchant or interest for visiting temples and shrines, so she would like to go to maybe masjid and maqams, and likes to go on outings like jalan jalan or should be divorced. Yeah. So this is from Japan, decree of the Tokugawa shogunate in the 1649. Yeah. 17th century. And if we might think that this is a Japanese version or an Asian version, it is not. It is also similar prescriptions were there in Europe as well. So I'll quote two other passages. One is this. This is Old English from 16th century. So I read it. The white wandering woman cannot want suspicion, bring some token of dishonesty. So a woman who wants to travel, perempuan yang ingin jalan-jalan, brings some token of dishonesty. She cannot be trusted. Yeah. And whereupon the tragical and comical poets, when they bring in any far traveling woman, for the most part they find her to be incontinent, means unchaste, like untrustworthy or non-virgin. So this is from Jerome Trailer in 1575. So yeah. And then another one, also from England, is that persons prohibited from traveling. So who cannot travel? So he counts women along with babies, infants, and decrepit persons, or people who are discreet, and fools like idiots, and madmen who are and the lunatics. So again, we can see a common sense, a common notion, whether in Asia, Arabia, or Europe, up to the modern period, against women traveling. Yeah. But did this mean that women did not travel? No, women did travel. So the before modernity and its restrictions, journeys were very much, the travel itself was very much gendered. Yeah. So especially the concept of solo travel, solo woman traveler vis-a-vis escorted traveler, as I mentioned, traveling alone or with a mahram. Yeah. So that sort of concept. And also, so men always can travel, solo traveler, like a backpacker, but according to Islam, but not women. Women cannot travel without a mahram, without being escorted. And then also, if women are traveling alone or even in groups, there are added risks more than men. So therefore, we see some of them. We have some fascinating accounts of women who travel, especially some women pirates who travel. There are two fascinating accounts from 18th century, late 17th and early 18th century. Mary Reid and Anna Bonny, two women pirates who, throughout their career, disguised as men, and then ventured into different oceans, in the Indian Ocean, Caribbean, and all these places as men. So women have to do all this when men can just travel as they are. And then also in the existing some studies, this is mainly about the 19th century, 20th century, the woman travels writings are very rare, and on that basis people make some generalization, but you subscribe to these binary constructions. But what interesting for me to this period is that before the 18th century, we have a lot of women who travel, but not necessarily wrote a travel account, yeah, like a rehala, yeah, or a journey, or a diary, yeah, or a journal. They did not necessarily write. So we have to, as historians, I come from history background, so history. As historians, we have to reconstruct their journeys from unwritten accounts. Yeah. So there might be small passages about women who travel, and we can ask a lot of questions. Yeah. Asking questions are important in order to reconstruct, the unwritten journeys. So the question is how can we read and reconstruct the unwritten historical travels? And this has been something that I have been doing mostly. Looking at some of the uh, myths, folklores, sagas, chronicles, from various countries, not just the Islamic countries, but many other places. And one of the most iconic figure, like my favorite, is these two people, Freddie's wife's daughter and Gudrid Goldbarn daughter. It's basically Norwegian name. Uh, you know, both of them are from the 10th century, so more than a millennium ago, who made into America, yeah, North America, in the 10th century. Both of them traveled, and then their accounts are available to us in two sagas. One is Saga of Iceland, and then the other one is Saga of Eric Derrell. So Eric Derrell, the father of the and they are their journeys are fascinating, especially Freddie's. She traveled if you, I'm not going to the details. Maybe if you're interested, we can come back to the details. Basically, she travels as a trader from to North America in the 10th century, along with many other Nordic or Viking. They are part of the Viking group, Viking merchants. And then she goes there along with the group, and then her journey is very dramatic, and then with a lot of ups and downs. But then she manages to come back to Iceland, and then but then she has an interesting conflict with her brother, and then her brother doesn't talk to her, and then all sort of different things. I can come back to that if you are interested later. But so this is one of my my favorite, or two of my favorite. And then another one is this girl from India, who sort of brings together all sort of intermixtures. Her name is Ashu, yeah, and then she is born as a Hindu, possibly as a Nair woman, matrilineal Nair family, but then into a Jewish husband who is originally from Tunisia but migrated into Yemen, but was settled between, or was straddling between Egypt and India. So this is in 12th century, yeah, again almost a millennium, 1,000 years ago, and she converts, or according to him, he also, according to the Jewish tradition, is also a Jewish ulama, Rabbi, yeah, and then he, according to the Jewish law book, it's very complicated. So he forges a lot of documents to prove that she was a slave, and then he manumates her, and then a manumitted slave can be converted, or converted to Judaism, and therefore so he makes all these documents, and then he fights his colleagues mainly in order to, because again according to the matrilineal tradition, the woman's property goes back to woman's clan, yeah. So he wanted to prove that no, she has converted and she has left the family. A left article by my colleague, dearest colleague of Kooria, who has written extensively about her journeys in 12th century. Yeah, this is some of the documents about her journeys. This is, even though the script, this is the Cairo Geniza documents, yeah. Even though the script is Hebrew, the language is Arabic. Yeah. So if you know the script and then if you know Arabic, then it is easy to understand what is it about. So then from the other, like, the Norwegian, Jewish, Hindu, Indian cases, we come to the Muslim woman. Yeah, the focus of what I wanted to talk. So there are general trends. Once we come, maybe before I go, should I go forward? Is there quick questions? Anyone would like to clarify before I drink some water?
Yeah.
Yeah. Any burning questions? Yeah, please. Either.
Ya, menarik sekali ya tentang topik perempuan sejarah dalam sebuah perjalanan gitu ya. Saya teringat ada salah satu catatan Letters from Turkey itu menuliskan tentang Regina di Montagu. She's an ambassador, wife ambassador from English, and she was sent to Osmani at the time, and she wrote about Harim and so Osmani culture and everything. I think one thing that you didn't mention there is women ambassador. I mean, the wives of ambassador. They have a privilege to travel around the world because they have a privilege to travel, and I think it is one of several points probably for women from women in global to travel because they have privilege.
Yeah.
But you didn't mention that.
Yeah. Thank you. No, I think I mentioned that, the diplomatic mission.
Okay.
And Lady Mondago, I think one of the most great figures because she accompanied her husband and wrote some fascinating letters, about her time in Istanbul. And then, so also in the course that I taught, we read some of her letters. And also there is another, a few other women also from England who, maybe even 1 century earlier, also went to Spain, similar, accompanying her husband, who was ambassador, but then her husband was incompetent, and she was doing everything, in order to save the interest of the England. But this is also a very important category. The women were privileged to travel along with their partners on diplomatic missions. Thank you.
Very interesting. I'm still thinking how this woman you are already mentioned in your presentation. I can pronounce well from Norwegian, right? How do they cope with the stigma or the situation that is not really good for them to travel abroad or something like that? Is there any story about this or?
No, that's a very important question. Thank you. I think what is interesting when I was reading the sagas, the primary sources closely, we don't see any stigmas. Maybe this is a unique aspect of the Vikings, where women were equally participating. And in all the accounts, all the Viking sagas, we see detailed accounts of women, not only traveling. So these two I picked them because they are the longest travelers. They travel across the continents, and for that matter, into present day United States, to America. But then in the sagas, we also see many other women who travel within the region, maybe from Norway to Iceland, Iceland to Greenland, Greenland to maybe Denmark, and Denmark to this sort of journeys are always mentioned. So in the sagas, these women also mentioned as part of that journey, just that they made longer journeys. And Fred is particularly interesting because she is believed to have killed her companions, and she looted the property of her companions, and therefore the image that she has. So that is why when she came back, her brother didn't talk to her because her companions were his friends, and she could. So for that, that is not necessarily a stigma, but basically a consequence of her acts or her crimes that she has committed, but not necessarily about the journey or woman traveling. And we don't see that much in the Viking account. One more question before I move forward. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. First of all, let me introduce myself first. My name is Muhammad Adi Putra, and you can call me Adi. Exactly, I can say I'm so happy. I'm tremendously happy because this is the first time for me to explain something or to ask something in front of all of you guys. And I can say this is one of the interesting topic. Why? Because actually, for this occasion, we talk about movement. And I remember because I am Buddhist people. In Buddhist people, there's one culture, like we can say that merantau. Merantau is like mostly men in Buddhist people, they always move to another place in our country or in my country. The trigger one is money and married. In Buddhist people, even try to get married, the trigger one have to have money. Why? Because it's really expensive to get married in Buddhist people. Therefore, Muslim men in Buddhist, yeah, you have to have money. And the trigger one, why they move? Because of money. But let me explain or move the other topic, especially in Somalia and Pakistan, because recently I always read some article from CNN and BBC, especially there's one cases about like one woman moved to another place because the reason one of the trigger one was hunger or starvation. And I'm really stressed to move because they have to move to another place because hungry, about hunger, and they don't have some food or they don't have some food to give their children or their family, and therefore they have to move. And so what's your opinion about that, and what the reason, or I mean, what is something or to fix that problem, in your opinion, something like it is all for me, and thanks for the opportunity, and thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Ms. Hardy, for the question. So, yeah, this is, and I'm from history. Yeah. So, of course, these issues, and I don't want to address the root problems of poverty or the hunger index that is everywhere. At least, sticking to my topic, we see that especially women who are enslaved, yeah, or even also men who are being enslaved. One of the reasons, it's not the only reason, but one of the reasons is that again the poverty in the earlier period. So they sell themselves, yeah, in order to save themselves from hunger or from poverty, or they sell their children. And we see that many instances where kids are being sold, in the hope that the kids would get better food maybe in a distant place. So we see that, and we have even some accounts where some kids who are sold by their parents, the kid becomes eventually very rich and successful, and then after that the parents come to meet them. Meet him, but he refuses to meet them because at the end of the day they have sold him, yeah, and selling, whether for poverty or hunger. The basic act of selling is basically he was detached from his parents and his childhood for a long time. So we see that many cases, and it's not a contemporary issue here in Pakistan or in Somalia, but it's everywhere. Just that only few places get reported. Yeah. And often we tend to have certain images, but it is not. Human trafficking, right? From all over. Yeah, even from Indonesia. Yeah, in UK is one of the most important rising burning issues. Yeah, so it's why at the end of the day they travel. So it's a different question, but yeah, we see that in similar instances. Okay, so now I'll come to the Muslim woman who travel. Before I come to some certain instances, I'll come to three or four women, a group of women who travel. Before that, I'll list out some of the major patterns. Yeah. So one is that Rihla fi talab al-ilm, in search of knowledge. Yeah. Women who travel, maybe in search of hadith, with a valid sanad, or with something or just to acquire better knowledge. Women who are traveling. And then the obvious reasons like Hajj, Umrah, but also Ziyarah to Maqam and things like that. And then also women who travel for Da'wah, preaching, or Tadris, for teaching and teaching. And then also women who travel as refugees, yeah, like maybe for Hijrah. Just one example, if you think of the first Hijrah, yeah, not the Hijrah from Makkah to Medina, but Makkah to Abyssinia. Yeah. In that group, there were also women, yeah, about 11 out of 83. Yeah. So if you try to reconstruct their story, they traveled from Makkah across the Red Sea, yeah, to Abyssinia. Just that, the stories are there; they are not told or explored in that sense. And then, in many instances, they accompany male relatives who are traveling on different purposes, and then admirals, and then slaves and concubines, and then what I would like to say that these are not any exclusive categories or an exhaustive list. So there can be many more, yeah, this sort of things, including maybe diplomatic missions that Maria mentioned. So I'll come to maybe three or four instances. Yeah. So we had to keep in mind none of these women wrote their own journal, yeah, their own diary. So we had to reconstruct their journey from the small fragmentary evidences that we have. Yeah. So one of this thing is from Ahmad bin Yahya al-Baladuri. Baladuri is one of the reputed historians of Islam. Yeah, who lived in the 9th century, and his text Futuhul Buldan. Yeah, and in Futuhul Buldan, so there is in this slide and in the next slide there are two passages that I take. Both passages are related to a group of women who are on one side they are sent as gifts, yeah, by one ruler from Sri Lanka to Arabia, to the Umayyad dynasty in Baghdad, or the governor of the Umayyads, Hajjaj bin Yusuf. Yeah, so it's about this one, and the second one is so they are sent as gifts, and then second is that they are being captured. While they were traveling, they were captured by the pirates. So one exercise that I do, now with my students, that basically this passage and the next passage, we spend about 3 hours only reading that passage. This is what it is: slow reading. Yeah, slow reading. It's like slow reading by slow biking. Yeah, it's a competition. You can often read maybe a fiction. You can read it very fast. Yeah, maybe in one day you read 200 pages. Yeah, if it is a novel. But reading slowly is also an exercise, especially if you are doing PhD and above. you read very closely, very slowly, so that you pay attention to different details. Yeah. So that is why we spend often 3 hours reading this passage and then this slide and the next slide. So here it is, one passage. Yeah. Do you want me to read it or would you read it by yourself? Okay. So after Mujah bin Sa'ad al-Tamim is there in Makkah means Sindh in present-day Pakistan. Hajjaj appointed Muhammad bin Harun bin Zira al-Namiri as governor of Sindh. Yeah. Not important. Yeah. Not important. But from there we come to, from the area of his governorship, Wilaya, the ruler of Ruby Island, Jaziratul Yaqut. Yaqut is Ruby, and it is basically a reference to Sri Lanka, because Sri Lanka looks like a ruby, like a pearl. Yeah. So from the ruler of Ruby Island, Jaziratul Yaqut, gifted some ladies born at his land as Muslims. And their fathers, who were merchants, had died there. He intended getting closer, or takarrub, ilal Hajjaj, with them, with these ladies, with these ladies being gifts. To the ship in which, to the ship in which they were traveling, appeared in Bawadis, or pirate ships, a group of mid people in Daipur, close to Gujarat, or close to India. They took the ships along with what those contained. So this is what I would say like a fast reading. But then if you read closely, basically we can ask a lot of questions. Yeah, this is about women who are sent as gifts. But then the first and foremost gifts. There are many questions. Why are they sent? Like why the women are sent as gifts? And that is a very obvious question. But then the other question is, who are their mothers? Yeah. So here it is mentioned about their fathers, who were merchants, have died there. So we can assume that their fathers were Arabs. Yeah. So they have come. But then who were their mothers? Were they also traveling from Arabia to Jaziratul Yaqut, to Sri Lanka, or were they local women? In either way, it is interesting, to look at the nuances between the traveling men and the traveling or non-traveling women. And if their mothers had traveled from Arabia, then it's another instance of women who might have traveled, from Arabia to Sri Lanka. But then also, the gift giving practices related to between a non-Muslim ruler and a Muslim ruler. Like in this case, Sri Lankan ruler and then why women were Muslims. Yeah. So if their mothers were Muslims, the religious identification, are after the fathers, and Muslim women being gifted as given as gifts is also an interesting dynamic of that period. Yeah. But basically, we can, once we pay attention closer, we can get more details into that. I'll continue with this story. One more passage, continuity of this. And so in the last sentence, you can see that they took the ships, so the pirates took the ships along with what those contained. So all the commodities, but also the women. So yeah, then a lady from among the gift women, who belonged to the tribe of Banu Yerbor, called or cried. What is there in the source is Nada. Or Hajjaj, so Hajjaj bin Yusuf. It or the call, cry reached Hajjaj bin Yusuf, and he said, so it's like almost like sending a message across, what do you call it, like a karama. So Hajjaj, who is in Baghdad, he replied, "Oh lady, I hear you." So he sent a mission to the local ruler named Zakir, requesting the release of the ladies. He, Dahir, said, "Verily, they are captured by pirates, Yusufs, and I cannot stand up to them. So, they are way powerful than me, so I cannot control." And then, basically, Baladri goes on gives two accounts, accounts of different armies that he sent from Arabia to Sindh or India, Pakistan, in order to save these women. And 2 or 3 Muslim commanders were killed by the local people, including one who belonged to the Buddhist group. But finally, a 17-year-old, 17 or 20-year-old Muhammad bin Qasim, a Muslim commander, succeeded in saving these women from the pirate. But again, once we pay attention to the different details, like especially the identification of the woman, ethnic identity. So here he says that a lady from among them who belonged to the tribe of Banu Yerzul. So the Nisba ke Aya here. So possibly related to the patrilineal descent, not necessarily to the woman. But then again, we don't know. So basically, once we pay attention to this, we also see this is also one of the areas where we see women who are traveling often captured by the pirates or by local rulers and then being enslaved or turned into. But in this instance, we see a different story. And this story is very popular still in Pakistan, especially. There is one text called Chachnama or Fathname Sindh. So in Pakistan, the Sindhi people often identify or call for this separate identity, and this text is often identified as one of the their origin stories related to Islam and so forth. But then again, we can see women being at the forefront of this. And from there, I come to a second. Okay. Okay, here. What the Yaqut, Jaziratul Yaqut. It is a different explanation why it is called Jaziratul Yaqut Mubiana. Because the woman there is beautiful. That's why it is called. Okay. So another interesting woman in terms of what I would say the Lahira fi Talab al-Ilm is this scholar, Fatima bin Sa'd al-Khair, a very interesting lady from 12th century, 12th and early 13th century. She's a Spanish from Andalusia, from Valencia, but she was born in China. Keep in mind, this is 12th century, yeah? So from Spain to China. And then her father was a scholar, but also a maritime trader, like a Tajir. And he educated all his girls, especially in Hadith. So Fatima also became a scholar of Hadith eventually. And she was in China, but also later when she traveled further. And then from China, she traveled for education, she traveled to Isfahan, in present-day Iran. And she studied with many scholars, including one female scholar. Her name is, sorry, I didn't mention the name. So she studied Mu'jamul Kabir, like an extensive volume of Hadith. The present published version has 37 volumes. So she studied this, with her female teacher in Isfahan. And then further, she went to Baghdad in Iraq and then studied with many male scholars. And then she got married, so maybe, I don't know where exactly she was married. Maybe she was married only after she completed her studies, She didn't want her husband to intervene in her studies. So after marriage with a scholar called Zainuddin Abul Hasan Ali bin Najjar, she moved to Damascus. So we can see that, from Spain to China to Iran to Iraq to finally Damascus, and then finally in Egypt, Cairo. And till her death, she continued to teach Hadith, and her students, both women and men, came from all over, from Egypt, from Syria, Palestine, and Persia. Yeah? And the source for this is this very interesting text by Akram Nadwi, Al-Muhaddithat. Yeah? It's a fascinating text. Are you familiar with this text?
No.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
This is like Akram Nadwi is a scholar, I think originally from Pakistan or India, but based in London. And he wanted to write a small book about women who specialized in hadith, Fatima bint Sadiq. So he started to write, but then he realized that there is not one book. So he collected materials for about 8 volumes. Yeah? So many women who are, known in hadith. So this text, Al-Muhaddithat, is a muqaddimah, on an introduction to what he is going to publish, later, as 8 volumes about women hadith scholars. Yeah, so Muhaddithat. So in this text, he cites Samani. So I think if it is not yet translated into Bahasa Indonesia, Muhaddithat must be translated to Bahasa Indonesia because it will be very useful for all these scholars who are interested. So he mentions, and this is just one case, yeah. In the text, if you on the hadith, like for scholars, I pick only one that I thought would be interesting because it is between Europe and Asia in 12th century, but also within Asia many places. But then within the text, you can see even many more cases of women who are traveling across across Arabia, across Persia, across India, and so forth. This particular text, the source is from Samani, who was a student of her father, Sa'd al-Khair, and in his text and so on. So basically, one example of a woman who is a scholar, who is a travel long distance. And one final case, maybe the preachers, the da'i or du'a, women who had traveled for missionary purposes. And in this case, I take from another account. It's called Qissat Chakravarti Farma. It is Qissa, that is Hikaya. Chakravarti is Chakravarti, like Maharaja. Farmad is Perumal. It's a local Malabari, the place where I come from. That is why I picked this. So this is a Qissa written possibly in the 14th or 15th century. Even though the accounts in it are related to 7th century. So from a historian's point of view, it is difficult to take it at its face value. That means even though it claims the story happened in the 7th century during the time of the Prophet, the text itself is written in 14th century or 15th century. So we have to take it with a little bit of, a pinch of salt, so to speak. The manuscript is, there are 2 manuscripts in the British Library, London, but also in India, I came across 2 more manuscripts, but I didn't compare them in order to see the extensive or the exact differences. So the story is a long story again, but I'm not going to go to the details in the interest of time. So that means so this is the story of Islam's arrival, Hikaya of the Islam, Masuk, India. Yeah. So this is the story of this king, Chakravarti Farma or Maharaja Perumal. who, yeah, in a nutshell, he happened to see the Inshikakul Qamar, yeah, the moon being split. This is a mu'jiza. Yeah, where he saw, so sitting in Malabar or in India, he saw this mu'jiza, that moon being split. And he noted it down in his diary, or he was very surprised that suddenly moon was split. And then in his port town, in his kingdom, a few traders from Arabia came, and he was asking, like along with other things, he was asking about this particular strange thing that he saw. So he said that, so the traders from Arabia told him, oh, okay, this is because of the prophet and the people in our land challenged him whether he can split the moon, and he accepted the challenge and he managed to split. It's a well-known mu'jiza, yeah. So then the Raja Perumal or Chakravarti Perumal, he was very curious to know more about the person, or the prophet. So he wanted to travel to Arabia. So he gave all his kingdom to his sister and his sister's nephews. So it's like, again, what I see, the matrilineal succession. So instead of giving directly to his sons, he gives to his sister, and then what you call it, like the nephews and nieces. And he goes away to Arabia. And then, according to the Qissa, he met the prophet, he converted to Islam, he stayed there. He wanted to continue staying in Arabia, but the prophet asked him to go back to India so that he can preach Islam there. And he agreed to go back. And on his way back, he died in Oman, in a place in the port town of Shahar Mukalla. But he was accompanied by a group of Sahaba, according to the Hikayat, according to the Qissa, called Habib bin Malik. Yeah, so I don't know that there is a Sahabi called Habib bin Malik, but at least in this Qissa there is one. So he was accompanied. So when he was dying, the king was dying, he told them to continue the journey to India, and he gave them a letter saying that I entrust you with all my all these things, and then he wrote a letter to his successors asking to facilitate them. So they arrived, and then they preached Islam and all sorts of different things related to that. In this group, what is interesting for me is that in this group, the Qissa also mentions a few women, who traveled from Arabia along with his woman. So his son Malik bin Habib, along with his wife called Kooria, and daughter of his uncle Sharaf bin Malik, and then also 10 more sons and 5 daughters, according to this story. And then, interestingly, the episode or the Qissa gives the details of the names of the women, Fatima, Aisha, Zainab, Tahira, and Halima. I don't know from where the names come from, but definitely from early Islamic, except maybe Tahira, but all the other names. And they were dispersed, so after their immediate arrival, they also dispersed to different places. Each were appointed to include Shahar, Dhofar, Somnath, and Kalh. And then some of them, arrived in Malabar as well. And then there are still some graves dedicated to them. So this story again mentions about the 7 events that happened during the life of Muhammad Nabi, right? But not the but the story itself is written possibly in the 14th century or 15th century. So it gives us a pattern, like some insights into the what we call it, like historical consciousness of women who are travel as preachers. The historicity of the text may be questioned, but it indicates the historical consciousness. Like if you take any hikayat or Bhagavad, in the Javanese tradition, or any chronicles, the historical authenticity of these materials or like the events that they mention might be suspicious, but then they definitely demonstrate the historical consciousness of this sort of journeys of women, or the historical phenomena that happened in the period. So for the last sentence is that even now there are some of the shrines dedicated to them. Yeah. So in the last part, I'll quickly run through some other movements. Again from the Indian Ocean region, we don't find any historical sources. So all the three sources, yeah. The first one, Baladuri, written in the 9th century, and then Samani, written in the 12th century, and the third one, Tisat Chakravarti, are written in the 14th or 15th century. Because all these are historical sources. What I now see is that quickly mentioned in the remaining maybe 5 minutes, three other women. We don't have historical texts like this, primary sources like this, but still very strong folk tradition, oral tradition about women who have traveled long distances. Okay, so one is this, pink mosque, yeah. It's called Bhima Palli. Palli means masjid. Bhima is like be woman, or like a very respected woman. Yeah, be woman. So according to the tradition, she and her son Abu Bakr, both of them had traveled, maybe in the 17th or 18th century from Arabia to Mecca, to the southern coast of India, and established a shrine. They became almost like wali, yeah. And even today, every year there is an annual festival at their shrine, and then even despite of the, or even throughout the year, if you go there, the place is always crowded with people who go there to cure their diseases, or to pray for the children, or for this oral tradition is this woman who had traveled son and then established himself in this small locality, yeah, in a coastal area. So that is one. I'll quickly run through. And the second one is, an African woman who has not one maqam, many maqam, yeah, many shrines. Her name is Mai Mishra. And that name Mishra is, like, in several ways very interesting. Some people say that it is, from Misr, from Egypt, so she came from Egypt. But then people say the predominant account is that she came from Ethiopia, along with her brother, who is also, I didn't put in his name, among the African community of India. So the African diaspora of India. Her shrine as well as his shrine. His name is Baba Gaur. Yeah, Baba Gaur. Is very important shrine among the African community of Indians. And in this picture also you can see some of these children, yeah, who belong to the African features. Who are still, so Mai Mishra, according to the tradition, so Baba Gaur also is a Sufi shaykh who also has come to Gujarat and Pakistan, this area. So there are shrines both in India and Pakistan dedicated to both sides. Yeah. So here itself you can see photos from two different places. One is Ranthambore and the other one from a forest national park. So there was one more, which I unfortunately forgot to put it, from Sri Lanka, also of a Arabian woman who married into a local Buddhist king, and eventually, even today, continues to be celebrated during the annual festivals. Okay, so this is the reason why I brought this is that there are many women travelers, like I think whether she came from Egypt or Ethiopia, or the previous woman who came from supposedly came from Arabia, they give us opportunities or windows to explore, journeys of women who are not studied or written or narrated or even acknowledged in the scholarly literature. Yeah, so it's a responsibility of anyone who is interested to explore these journeys. So conclusions, tentative, not something concrete. So matrilineal mobility being, so that's how I came to the topic, and matrilineal and so forth in the Indian Ocean. And then the larger pattern of gendered mobility in the Indian Ocean literature against the wide notion that ocean or the Indian Ocean as a space only for men, yeah, or as a patriarchal space. And also questioning the hypothesis or the questioning the existing notion that men only traveled while women were immobile or did not travel. From these cases that we can see that it was not the case. There were many who did travel extensively. The problem is that their journeys are unwritten compared to maybe Hilary Batuta or Marco Polo's journeys or Magellan's journeys. But still, from other sources, even though they did not write themselves, from the sources, other sources, like from the people who wrote about them, yeah. Second sources, we can reconstruct their journeys. Even if you think of this way, like Ibn Battuta himself did not write the history, yeah. Another scholar wrote it. And then also there are a lot of fabrications and things like that. Possibly it was plagiarized and things like that. So basically, while we give all the privileges of suspicion for men, we can also, take even more, strong evidences for women who have traveled, and just that their stories are not necessarily written by themselves, but still provides us insights into the larger patterns. And then when we have something like a qissa or hikaya, or even the oral tradition in the last later part of the presentation, that we can question the narratives, not necessarily for, so we cannot necessarily take them for their veracity or historicity, but their intentions and their, the larger patterns or the insights that they give us are very important. And then diverse journeys of Muslim women and their agency before being saved. This is something like, do Muslim women need to be saved? Yeah, this question from Ulu. So we have to understand that, in terms of the diverse journeys of Muslim women and their, agency in the long journeys. And the mythical narratives with grains of historical consciousness. Some of these, oral traditions might be folk traditions, oral traditions, but still they give us some grains, small insights into the historical consciousness of the similar journeys of the woman who have in the same pattern. Okay, that's it. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Professor Mahmood, for your very extensive lecture, enlightening. Saya summary sedikit ya, dalam bahasa Indonesia aja. Saya lama untuk bahasa Inggris juga agak susah. Oke, jadi yang kita bisa lihat bahwa ini adalah Profesor Mahmood kan orang sejarah ya, jadi bagaimana, jadi pertanyaannya adalah bagaimana kita mengetahui sejarah perempuan di Indian Ocean. Indonesia apa? Samudra India. Samudra India. Apakah yang travel itu cowok aja ataukah cewek juga gitu. Untuk yang kita tahu bahwa yang menulis diary mereka, para traveler itu rata-rata laki-laki, ya kan, Marco Polo, siapa tadi, Ibu Batuta, segala macam itu rata-ratanya. Maka sebagai sejarawan kan pertanyaannya lantas di mana perempuan, apakah mereka tidak mobil, mereka hanya menjedok di dia aja di rumah, atau ya sejarah di mana sejarah mereka, apakah yang mempunyai sejarah itu hanya laki-laki? Ini pertanyaan seperti itu menjadi menarik bagi sejarawan. Nah, masalahnya adalah bagaimana kita merekonstruksi sejarah mereka, bahan apa yang dibutuhkan kan gitu. Nah, di sini kita lihat dari presentasi tadi, memang ditemukan kesulitan-kesulitan untuk mencari bagaimana sejarah perempuan itu bisa kita tulis ya, dari sumber yang sangat primer. Ya. Nah, pada akhirnya sebagai sejarawan harus mencari alternatif. Kalau tidak ada yang primer, maka sekunder atau tersier bisa terjadi. Nah, ini yang dilakukan oleh Profesor Mahmood ini ya. Dan kita bisa lihat tadi ada di dalam kitab kuning ya, kita mau jam terbit kembali. Balaturi, mau jamul budan. Jadi di dalam kitab-kitab sejarah yang ditulis oleh laki-laki juga tadi, tetapi dia juga menemukan di sumber-sumber lain yang tidak. Kalau jam budan itu kan terkenal sekali ya, kita besar dalam bahasa Arab. Tapi juga ditemukan di penulis yang akuntansi, ya. Ini juga laki-laki lagi penulisnya juga dalam kitab dari Al-Muhaddits. Kemudian yang lebih lokal adalah kitab namanya Sunarwoto. Oh, ini juga dalam bahasa. And the authorities this still manuscript. Jadi ini ada di manuskrip yang berjudul Sunarwoto. Jadi dari tulisan-tulisan itu, dari kitab berbahasa Arab, dan juga ini masih manuskrip dalam bentuk tulis tangan, direkonstruksi gitu. Dan pada akhirnya kita bisa tahu di sini bahwa bagaimana travelingnya perempuan itu. Dan ya perempuan tadi ada kisah perempuan jadi gifts jadi oleh-oleh raja segala macam, dan kemudian ada juga yang captive tawanan ya kan, ikut suaminya ikut perang di daerah lain, kemudian tawar itu kan moving kan itu. Jadi idenya adalah bagaimana mobilitas perempuan di masa lalu di saat Anda pikir Anda bayangkan belum ada teknologi steam tadi kapal, apalagi airline ya, pesawat terbang itu. Dan kita bisa temukan ternyata ada juga ulama di sana yang terlibat di dalam traveling itu. Kita temukan tadi apa namanya? Fatimah, dan juga kita temukan preacher juga, dan tadi yang dari Sri Lanka. Jadi sampai di situ kita bisa melihat bahwa meskipun rekonstruksi sejarah perempuan travel melintasi berbagai lautan dan samudra gitu, tetapi meskipun sumbernya itu sekunder atau bahkan jadi ada, kalau sejarawan itu kan dituntut untuk menunjukkan otentisitas dari sumber, jadi keaslian itu. Dan kita temukan punya adalah saga ya. Saga apa? Ya, punya saga kalian tahu. Jadi cerita-cerita tentang orang Vatikan. Nah, meskipun begitu kita bisa melihat bahwa ditulisnya sejarah mereka dalam sumber yang tadi itu yang masih diragukan dan kita bisa melihat ada bagaimana kesadaran historis yang dibangun di dalam cerita-cerita narasi di dalam sumber-sumber itu. Kira-kira seperti itu. Terima kasih. Dan siapa yang mau bertanya atau yang punya catatan lebih komprehensif dari saya? Saya bukan orang sejarah jadi agak. Nah. Ya ampun, kalian lebih banyak kan dari konseling terus apa kan jadinya agak ini juga. So they are student of counseling, Islamic counseling. We don't have.
Why then?
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
Saya pakai bahasa Indonesia aja ya.
Yeah.
Oke, terima kasih. Satu hal yang menarik ya dari presentasi Mahmood tadi itu adalah kalau di dalam tradisi Viking ya, di film-film di Netflix itu ada tentang Viking, barbarian untuk Indonesia. Ada semacam kesetaraan di dalam mereka, equality ya, in the tradition ya, jadi mereka seperti di sana. Tetapi di dalam hikayat mungkin yang dua teks tadi itu ada informasi tentang perempuan sebagai gift gitu. Tetapi yang menarik bagi saya adalah ada cerita tentang Fatimah tadi. Itu kalau dilihat dari perspektif saat ini, dari perspektif modern itu sangat kosmopolitan banget kan, seorang perempuan dengan latar belakang orang tua yang sekolah juga berdagang gitu, terus anaknya bisa mobile dengan kapal ya, sana kemari dan belajar. Itu di era yang saya kira bisa isu-isu tadi seperti di Jepang, perempuan minum teh saja itu langsung dicerai gitu ya. Kalau sekarang nggak bisa ke kafe itu Mahmood ya. Kalau kayak Jepang gitu. Jadi saya nggak tahu, I'm curious to know how the context of the Fatima. Bagaimana di dalam tradisi yang sebenarnya di Eropa dan di Jepang itu seperti itu. Ada satu kisah yang menarik di dalam tradisi Islam yang Fatimah tadi itu yang saya kira luar biasa gitu. Ya, just curious to know. Terima kasih.
Thank you. Yeah, it is very interesting, the journeys of the people like that. Definitely, we see Fatima bint Saud al-Khair would travel from Spain to China from his father. While even today it is very rare, very few people who manage to go to maybe to Al-Azhar and study. Very few women, or even to Europe. Now it has become completely, but if we comparatively easier, but if you think of maybe 40 years ago, 50 years ago, it was almost impossible, nearly impossible for women to travel. So in that case, from that perspective, people like this, in one way they were accompanying their parents, so she accompanied her parents, but so possibly she traveled from Europe to China along with her father, and but then she also built upon that. She didn't stop there. She traveled from China to Isfahan, yeah, and then to Baghdad and so forth. So I think once you get an opportunity, you get more courage to travel further. And I think at that time it was not a possibility. They could utilize the opportunities of the time. And maybe women had, I don't know, I'm trying to understand, maybe better prospects than modernity or early modernity. Modernity and early modernity. Modernity is all about patriarchy, yeah. The more modern a society is, the more patriarchal it is. And this is like very true everywhere. So from the Renaissance, Reformism, Renaissance, and modernity. In the European context, we see that it becomes more and more patriarchal. And it's like a shogu. Maybe in Japan also, there's a reflection. Yeah. So maybe because of that, like less modernized means less patriarchal. Yeah. And that is the best example, some of the matrilineal communities before modernity. But this is something that we have to explore further.
Thank you.
But they can also ask any questions, not necessarily.
Oke, mau tanya yang lain juga boleh.
Boleh.
Yeah, we might.
Kita sudah bertemu beberapa hari yang lalu, minggu yang lalu.
Acara keluarga.
Oh, bukan. Ya, menarik ya. Saya kira cerita tentang perjalanan perempuan untuk travel Middle East for any occasion, pilgrimage, another. Kita juga ada gitu dalam beberapa catatan. Saya mengingat ada namanya Fatimah Nisa Buri, dia juga seorang sufi dan untuk melakukan perjalanan spiritual dan juga untuk mencari ilmu dan juga preaching, dia juga ke Damaskus, kemudian ke beberapa tempat gitu, jadi sudah ada. Kemudian juga di Indonesia sendiri, di Nusantara kita juga punya misalnya Nyai Kooria Hashim, itu juga Nyai Kooria Hashim. She have, so she is seorang nyai di Jombang, ya, keturunan dari Kiai Hashim Asy'ari kalau salah. Dia juga melakukan perjalanan ke Mekah untuk pilgrims dan mendirikan sebuah sekolahan benar di Mekah gitu ya. Jadi sebenarnya tradisi ini juga sudah ada. Bahkan dalam beberapa catatan sejarah ada sekitar 700 sekian tahun 1898 ada sekitar 700 sekian perempuan yang melakukan perjalanan pilgrim ke Mekah dari 8.000 penduduk Nusantara gitu. Artinya perempuan untuk taking role itu sudah ada sejak dulu. But one question is why their role and participations are not are excluded from from our history accounts. Why?
Yeah, it's a very important aspect. Yeah, when we write history of Islam in Nusantara or history of ulama or biography of ulama, it's all about men. Yeah, like toko of any organization. It's always like more or less always about men. But it's also about not people studying them in detail. Once you write them in detail, once you write about them in detail, continue to talk about them in detail. People cannot ignore. Yeah. So there is one study by Tika Ramadini.
Yeah.
Her PhD is about the Muslim pilgrims, Muslim women pilgrims from Indonesia or Nusantara in the 19th and 20th century to Makkah. So there were many similar women. And in my course, I think I looked at 3 women. One is Lakshmana Malahayati. Again, there's only small reference, from 17th century, 16th century, only small reference, maybe one sentence about her. But then as we move forward, we have more accounts about Lakshmana Malahayati, a woman admiral, who fought against the Portuguese in Aceh. That is one that we spend again 3 hours on. And the other one is Leonard Bruce's work on bitter bombs. It's about a Japanese Indonesian woman. So Indonesian woman, but originally from Japan. She was born in Japan to a Dutch husband, a Dutch father, and a Japanese mother. But when she was little, she was brought to Batavia, to Jakarta. And in the 17th and 18th century, she had a huge fight with her second Dutch husband, because according to the Dutch law or European law at large, women were not allowed to possess any property. And after the marriage, all the properties of the woman goes to the husband. It's very patriarchal. This is what I say. Modernity comes in, it becomes very patriarchal. So, according to the Indonesian or Japanese law, women were allowed to possess their own property. And with the marriage, her property remains her own property. But the European law didn't allow the woman to have any say to sell, to own, to trade, to transact her property. So the Dutchman understood exactly this thing, that after the death of her first husband, she had acquired a lot of wealth, and he wanted to take that, basically through marriage, but she fought against that. And then she traveled to Hague in the 18th century to appeal against her husband. So her journey between Japan and Indonesia to Hague in the 18th century, late 17th and early 18th century is also interesting story. I think we can see similar Japanese woman also from the earlier period, from Majapahitara, Mataram, many other women. Just that the stories are hardly mentioned. Yeah. Like for example, Deep Nagro's great grandmother, right? She's also like an Halima, who also studied and then also possibly according to Manfatur Rahman, belonged to the Shatariya Sufi order, right? So, and then also she studied with a disciple of Sheikh Abdul Rahuf Singli. So there is this whole, interesting stories. Just that, when someone writes a history of Majapahit or Mataram, or before that, like the Shailendra dynasty, or otherwise, we don't write about them. So the more attention to that is more needed. It's like, as an Indian historian put it, visible history and invisible woman. So history is visible, but the women are invisible in the accounts. That is an unfair injustice or injustice done to the history.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Terima kasih. Perkenalkan, nama saya Dewi Agung. Sangat menarik diskusi yang Bapak sampaikan tadi, bahwa perempuan yang MOOC itu sangat general. Tadi disampaikan ada gift dan sebagainya. Nah, adakah catatan sejarah? Di sini kan tadi disampaikan bahwa penjelajah itu banyak sekali, seperti yang paling famous itu mungkin Ibnu Battuta, Panglima Ceko. Nah, adakah catatan bahwa mereka itu menjelajah sendiri atau bawa istri? Nah, ketika mereka membawa istri, apakah istri mereka bisa disebut sebagai penjelajah perempuan juga gitu? Adakah catatan seperti itu? Terima kasih.
Thank you. If I understand the question, for Ibn Battuta or Chan Ho, whether women also travel with them, yeah. So interesting for Chan Ho, he is not. Is a castrated man, yeah? Eunuch. So what is the term for eunuch? Eunuch. In Bahasa Indonesia? Eunuch. Those who are castrated.
Kasim itu lebih aku nyebut mensulikan
Kebiri. Tidak diungsikan.
Kebiri.
Kebiri asli.
Kebiri.
Kebiri.
Oh, okay.
Kebiri kayak paksaan mas, jadi emang.
Ya memang itu Kebiri.
So he was like, he himself did not depend on woman, yeah? And he was in need. But Ibn Battuta's case is interesting because we often see that, many women accompanying him. And he also married many, in many places. If you were to believe him, he married in many places. Like in Maldives, he married, in India, he married. And also, we see that, maybe he did not take his wives with him. And also, according to the customs of that period, women were not allowed to accompany their husbands if their husbands are leaving the place, because they wanted to be with their family and so forth. But we see that in some instances, he took some slave woman, slave woman who served with him and who traveled with him, from place to places, and we see that in his account. So there are instances of women who travel with the people like Ibn Battuta, but without a name or without any detail, apart from a very small reference.
Ayo.
Oke, silakan.
Suasana ya. Ayo guys.
Perempuan nggak pernah.
Iya, dia bro. Udah ada catatan.
Saya menyampaikan. Ya, jadi kalau terkait dengan Ibnu Battuta, kalau kita baca catatan-catatan sejarah itu kan justru dia banyak menikahi perempuan ya, kalau tidak salah dalam perjalanannya itu. Saya mau menyambung terkait dengan Fatimah Sa'ad al-Khair tadi. Disebutkan bahwa dia lahir di Cina ya. Tapi kalau kita membaca beberapa referensi Arab, misalnya seperti Syiar A'lamin Nubala, di mana di situ Fatimah binti Sa'ad al-Khair masuk dalam tobakoh yang ke-31 dari para muhaddisin, dan juga di misalnya Al-A'lam Al-Zarqali, karya Imam Al-Zarqali, disebutkan bahwa dia lahir di Iran, di Asbahan, yang mana kemudian dia belajar di Damaskus, yang kalau tidak salah pada masa Fatimah ini, Damaskus ini di bawah pemerintahan Daulah Kooria, di mana pada masa ini Damaskus ini memang sedang secara keilmuan sedang sangat berkembang, banyak sekali masjid-masjid menjadi pusat belajar, banyak sekali madrasah-madrasah fikih dari 4 madhab besar itu ada semua gitu. Di mana di negara lain seperti negara Islam lain sedang terjadi perang salib kalau tidak salah ya, di abad ke-6 Hijriah ini. Nah, barangkali gitu Anda memiliki referensi lain terkait dengan lahirnya tadi Fatimah binti Sa'ad al-Khair. Tapi kalau kita lihat riwayatnya, kalau memang di Asbahan, Iran, ini lebih dekat dengan Damaskus, Syria gitu, seperti itu. Dan terkait dengan kesempatan dia belajar, saya pikir ini juga tidak jauh atau yang cukup berperan penting juga dukungan dari keluarganya yang mengizinkan dia untuk melakukan traveling ke Syria untuk belajar. Kemudian pertanyaan saya gitu, bagaimana sebenarnya pada masa Daulah Kooria ini di Damaskus, yang mana juga secara umum itu di akhir Daulah Abbasiyah kalau tidak salah. Bagaimana kesempatan perempuan belajar dan juga perempuan aktif di publik gitu, karena akhirnya Fatimah ini kan menikah dengan seorang dai, seorang wahid gitu disebutkan. Nah, ketika dia kalau kasusnya Fatimah, kebetulan dia memiliki akses dan diberikan kesempatan yang cukup besar untuk aktif di publik, menyampaikan ilmunya dan sebagainya. Nah, tapi pertanyaan saya secara umum, bagaimana sebenarnya kesempatan perempuan pada masa itu? Terima kasih.
Okay, thank you. Very important question. On the first aspect, the serum element and other things, these are comparatively later sources, compared to some Sunani, who is her father's student, So it's an immediate reference compared to the later sources. On the general education of women in Syria or Damascus at that period, we see that not only him, even around this period, and also, for example, Nawawi and many others who studied hadith, mainly hadith. Women were active in the hadith transmission. They studied with the Imam Nawawi, whom I studied in detail. He also studied with many women. So there are two aspects which are very important. One is the sanad, silsila. So silsila, even though Fatima bint Saad al-Khair studied in Isfahan, she would still go further, looking for women who are older, who have short sanad, to the Prophet. So that sanad becomes the more the sanad is shorter, the better the connection, to the Prophet. So that is one aspect. So therefore, you would look for, even if you already studied this one, but you still, even if you are a teacher, you still study, looking for better sanad. That is one. And the second is also the question of privilege. Again, most of these people are, partners or partners or children of some established ulama. But that doesn't so something similar to here also maybe as you mentioned Hashim Ashari's daughter or a descendant, granddaughter or similar to that, from the established families of the scholars, mostly these women come. But also we have to keep in mind that from the ulama families itself, only these women came. So they had many options, to continue ilm or not to continue. They could do something else completely. But the very choice they made themselves that to continue that tradition, to which they had access. But also we see that many other who are not necessarily with any background, any privilege, but still they are dedicated to the ilm. And also we can imagine, maybe the Gajian, the Majlis Ta'lim that these women organize, to which many other women would come, right? So we know only those who are teaching, but the students who are coming, right, many women. So they are not necessarily from any scholarly family. So to this, men would come, but also women would come. So that the very aspect that they were teaching proves that the girls' education, women's education, was comparatively stronger in this area. So I already mentioned Akram Nadwi's work, Hadithat, which is a great study. And then there is also another book by Asma Sa'i, on Hadith transmission, women and Hadith transmission up to 15th century. Asma Sa'i, she is a professor of history at UCLA, University of California, Los Angeles. So she also mentions about the Hadith transmission. So I think it's about much more broader and nuanced than what we think. Did that answer your question? Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you again for Mr. Mahmood for your very enlightening lecture, and I hope that this also inspires students to develop the knowledge, historical knowledge. Even though we don't have any historical faculty here, we have already erased the sejarah kebudayaan Indonesia. In the past, we had sejarah kebudayaan Islam, SKI, but it's already so here mostly from Islamic counseling and also from so but still this is very important experience for them to attend this kind of lecture. Again, thank you very much, and mari kita beri aplaus.